My first IT job was straight out of college, and I majored in computer programming. And at one of the university recruiting events, a bank was recruiting for their IT rotational program. And I interviewed and got the job, and that's how I got my first job in IT. So what would I do the same and what would I do differently? So I was lucky that I joined, my first role was a IT rotational program. So it's a 2-year program of 4 rotations within the IT organization. So some of it was very technical, some of it was IT project management work. So I think the one thing I did right was coming out of college, I majored in computer programming, and I wasn't exactly sure if I wanted at least, to spend the foreseeable future doing programming. So taking on a job that allows you to do some experimentation, in my case, 4 rotations in 2 years, is something I'd recommend, right? You always think, hey, you have a degree and you may not be sure if that degree is something you purely want to focus on for the next 30 years. So experimenting a little coming out of that into that first job, I think was something I did well. Something that I wish I would have maybe done is, really try and understand the company I was joining. I love my company, but I think that was more luck than anything. I was interviewing for many companies and I was really just focused on getting a job. But as I progressed in my career and was really focused on moving up, I think just looking back, it's important to work for a company that aligns with your values, aligns with what you're trying to achieve, because that will make the work more enjoyable. I think that will allow you to succeed at the company and hopefully succeed faster, right? When you're working at a company that you like and you enjoy, and it's not really just about the name of the company, right, or the salary. So I'd recommend spending a little more time understanding the company you're joining, what they're about, to make sure it's a place you see yourself for at least 2-3 years. So I did a slight career search, so it wasn't too drastic, but I used to be more general IT, and then coding, development work, right, engineering work, and then I moved over to security, and that's how I landed in the security space. So not as drastic, but still a slight pivot. And what I'd recommend and what worked for me was, throughout your career, like what I tried to do as I was making this pivot was, one, find some mentors in that area that I want to be in. And those are mentors outside of the company I was a part of, as well as in the company, just to understand the organization. So, I'd spent some time with our CISO at a few companies back, just understanding the organization, what they're working on, what they're trying to do. And I did share my interest in doing a pivot into security. And what worked out and what I recommend is, whenever you're trying to make that change, there are always, I wouldn't say entry-level jobs, but there are positions within that new career field that people are trying to enter that are maybe they're not the most technical within that new field, right? There's a mixture of that field plus maybe some project management or some other type of skill that the individual may be, and those are the roles you should go after. And that allows you to slowly make that pivot, build that experience, right? So that when a job in that field is readily available, at least you can, demonstrate, hey, I may not be the SME, the subject matter expert, but I do have some experience. I've led some projects that are maybe adjacent to this new field, and allows you to, to kind of step in in that sort of partial role, right? Where some experience is required, but not all the full experiences. So I'd recommend, to summarize it, getting some mentors who can kind of help point you to resources that build your just basic knowledge of that field, maybe that you're trying to switch into. And then second, with those mentors, letting them know you're trying to look for a new role in that space. And I'm sure there'll be something that doesn't require you to be a full expert, that allows you to kind of, dip your toes in and not only build the experience, but also do a sense check. Is this really the right pivot you want to make? Do you think this is where you want to be moving forward? I've heard a lot of folks like just talking about the future proofing, and that's not necessarily something that I subscribe to, right? And the reason I don't is, technology changes so fast, right? We're in this AI boom, and things are, year over year are moving fast, are maturing fast, and things that were relevant, 2 years ago are not necessarily the top thing today. So it's hard future proofing yourself when the technology is changing. So what I try and do, and I try and help my team do this, is we have to stay, maybe not ahead of the curve, but keep up with the curve as things are changing. So what that means is, in today's world, my team, our IT team, is spending a lot of time with AI, right? With ChatGPT, Google Gemini, trying to build GPTs, trying to understand how can we incorporate those into our existing processes? How can we leverage them to automate or do other things? And I think when you keep up with technology, you just read a lot and understand what's going on, I think that will allow you, in maybe a weird way, future proofing, because you always know what's happening in the industry, right? And you're tapped into that and understand how is it impacting your organization, how can your organization take advantage. I think the concern of trying to future proof yourself and say, hey, I'm this expert of Chat GPT today, right? And I know it the best in my organization, is, next year there's going to be something new, something different, right? And if you're just still stuck on a technology that maybe is no longer the prevailing technology, organizations mature, and you therefore don't future-proof yourself. You kind of get left behind. So I think the best way to future-proof yourself is read, stay current on industry events, industry products, right? And take advantage of those, bring those back to your leadership and show them that you're thinking creatively, how to kind of tap into it, because most times than not, they're reading the same things. And they're also wondering, how can we capitalize on this new technology? Yeah, there's thousands, millions of resumes. Everybody has their way of thinking the best resume. So I think we could go many ways, but when I recruit, right, specific to myself personally, when I recruit new members of my team and I'm looking at resumes, the few things that I look for, right, are first, I'm looking at impact, right? When somebody has a resume of just a bunch of to-dos, right, or things they did, like a sort of a completed task list, I don't, that has little value for me, right? Like, everybody can get stuff accomplished if they're diligent, manage their time well. But what I'm really looking for is to understand, what was that impact? And that impact can come in multiple ways, right? You could have saved money, you could have automated something, so, less people to do a bunch of manual work. And there are many other ways you can think of it. So I'm always looking for a resume that talks about impact and is less about, these are the 10 things I did in my last role. That is one. And then I also look at responsibilities. A lot of times in resumes, and also in interviews, people talk, they say, we did this, we did that, right? And they talk about the team, and then that's great, right? That's that team mentality. But I'm also interested to know at the individual level, what were your responsibilities? What did you own? What did you do as part of your team, right? So being descriptive about, hey, I was spearheading this thing, right? And it included a team of 5 people that were 1 architect, 3 engineers, all of that. That's also helpful, right, to understand. And then the last thing is just quantifying it, right? I know this goes back maybe a little to impact, but quantifying how big that impact was, right? It doesn't always have to be big, but seeing somebody include some numbers, right? Like, hey, the automation I led saved 10 minutes, or it saved 30 seconds, but we do this 1,000 times a week, right? That's the sort of detail that I look in a resume. So I would say that too. And lastly, spelling and grammar, super critical. You got to get that right. If I see some spelling or grammatical error, that just shows a level of a lack of care, right, in the resume, and especially in the IT field. A lot of times, myself, my team, we're the face of my team interacts with everybody across the organization, right? As an IT team, you're getting help desk tickets, you're troubleshooting, access requests, you're setting up integration. So you're interacting with a lot of people, from your analysts, right, junior analysts, all the way up to the CEO. So being able to write and communicate properly is super key. And I look for that in a resume, because I know those people potentially will be, on a Zoom call with our CEO, and I don't want to have to worry about, are they, speaking correctly? Are they writing the right emails, with no errors in them? Yeah, multiple things. So I think, taking from my experience, a lot of the opportunities I've had are through networking. So I would highly recommend people, don't wait to build your network until when you need a job, right? That should be an ongoing thing all the time. You're kind of keeping a network of people you worked with in the past, people you found on LinkedIn, and just attending, relevant events, right, around the job you'd like or the industries you'd like to be in, to meet people and hopefully, find your next opportunity. But I also say, you should be, I would recommend somebody look at LinkedIn, understand what the jobs out there are available, to get a sense, right? Just because, I've gotten them through a network, I know definitely people who've gotten jobs through LinkedIn, and that is a worthwhile resource. So I'd say, hey, make sure your LinkedIn profile's up to date. Get the job alerts, right, and apply to those jobs if you see them as a fit. But I'd also say, don't rely on one or the other completely, right? Sometimes it does take a while to find a job, and the more you're seeing what's available in the market, and that gives you, sort of better visibility into not only what you want or what you may be good for, that will increase your chances of finding the right job. So I think there are multiple ways of doing this. I'll share some, and I'm sure others have probably different opinions. So the first I talk about is your network, right? Having a network that is strong, that spans different industries, right, and different levels of expertise, I think is important. You can always tap your network to kind of find those opportunities. And I always tell people, don't wait until you need a job to build your network, right? That should be an ongoing thing. It's a living, breathing thing that you work on and focus, so that when the time does come up, you're ready, right? And you have at least 3 or 4 people you think you can reach out to. The second is LinkedIn. I found LinkedIn to be a pretty helpful resource, right? It kind of gets all the jobs that are out there, displays them, and people are posting and sharing that they're hiring. So I find that also a helpful resource to find and identify a job. The third thing is, if there's a specific company you're interested in, you can always go to their website, check out their career page, and subscribe to any of those alerts. Alerts to understand what jobs are available. The last thing that I haven't personally used, but I have noticed, right, just being in the information security field, the tech field, there are newsletters that I subscribe to, key leaders within the IT and tech space that send out newsletters about what's going on and the latest and greatest. And sometimes some of them have a section, towards the bottom about careers, right, or jobs that are available. So I've seen those, displayed a few times, and that, if there's a newsletter that you're subscribing to that resonates with you and has that may be another opportunity of finding those maybe more niche roles that you would otherwise not hear about on LinkedIn or through your network. Good question. It's hard because there's a lot going on and a lot is changing. But the ones that come to mind, I just talked about, I just mentioned the newsletters. So I subscribe to several newsletters out there. And I know it feels like there are maybe thousands of them out there. But in terms of key categories that I'm interested in, let's say security, AI, identity and access management, there are a few newsletters that I subscribe to, and that's how I try and stay alert. That's one channel that I use. The other one, talking to vendors. I spend a lot of time as a head of InfoSec just talking to vendors, and that's not because there are a lot of tools that I'm trying to procure, but I always want to understand, hey, what are they offering? What are other companies in the industry, right? What are they looking at? Where are they finding value? So I spend time talking to these vendors, asking for demos just to see what their tools are capable of, and potentially how could they help us move our the maturity of our InfoSec program. And then the last thing I'd say is just playing around and reading, right? It's just reading articles about the tech space, what's changing, what's going on, and being part of some early releases of some software, some SaaS tools, I think allows me to stay up to speed and understand what's going on, right, and what's changing. So that's how I try and stay up to date. So I think it's just as many channels as possible, reading, I think also doing, right? So trying to subscribe to a pilot, right, and test it out. I know a lot of companies are always looking for people to try out their applications. Being a doer like that also helps you just understand the possibilities and the opportunities of new tech that's always being rolled out. To me, it's not a deal breaker and it's not a hard requirement. I do think there's value, right, in having those. It shows some discipline, some interest, right, in that space, and some determination, right, to get those, because I know a lot of those require some sacrifice and commitment to achieve them. But in the same breath, I don't. It's just one of those data points, right, that I take into consideration as I'm trying to hire somebody or recruit somebody on my team. I think I've come across many capable people who don't have the certifications, right? And there could be many reasons why somebody doesn't have that certification. And so I think using that, using that as a way to maybe discount certain people I find to be unfair. So yes, it adds a little more weight, but I don't think it's something that would discount me from considering somebody. Subscribing, maybe I wouldn't go as far, but when I think of ITIL, when I think of best practices, right, industry best practices, or quote unquote the right way to do things, I think it's very important that there is sort of there is a standard, right, that we as a team, that myself or any company should follow, right? I think one, that helps introduce some rigor, and a lot of what we do, right, is built on consistency, right, and making something repeatable. So the only way you can make something repeatable is if you follow a set of standards, and typically those are the best practices. And I think with those, that ITIL or whatever it may be, right, that also, there is some level of security that comes with it, right? You're doing it in a repeatable manner, so you're hopefully considered any security gaps and things like that, and as you repeat them, you're ensuring you're addressing those. So there are many standards, ITIL one of them, right? And I'm also thinking about compliance and things beyond, right? So there's ISO, there's NIST. Personally, I'm a big fan of like NIST, right? Because it really lays out from a cybersecurity perspective, a framework that ensures that you are covering your bases and you are maturing and focusing on the right things in the right way at the right time. So I do think having some standard or some framework that you're following is super critical. Depending on the industry, right? I think there's leeway and personal, or I should say subjective, standards that could be followed. But at the heart of it, I do think it's important to have some type of framework or set of standards that you're following, so that there's some rigor and some repeatability to whatever you're implementing or what you're managing. So the first one is definitely want somebody who not only has the skills from a technical perspective, but has the communication skills. That's super important. Number one, right? I think this has been said many times. It's easier to teach somebody the technical skills than the communication skills. And just as an IT team interfacing with the organization, I think communication is paramount in order to be successful. But from a culture perspective, aligning around one framework, right? We talked about ITIL. I think having a framework to guide the organization or the team is important, right? And what that does is it provides clarity about how you should approach initiatives, how you should do things within the team to meet a certain level of rigor or standard. I think that's important. The other thing is what I do with my team is, we have what I call like stand-ups, right? They're not very, they're not daily the way you could in terms of an agile team, but we do quick stand-ups just to make sure we're talking with each other like every other day to ensure we're all on the same page, right? We're a small team, so we want to make sure everybody knows what the other person's working on so we can support each other. And there's a lot of overlap in the work we do. So I think communication within the team, so there's clear visibility about what everybody's working on, is important and allows everybody to row the boat in the same direction. The other big thing I'm a big fan of is we experiment a lot because we're a startup and we play with things, we implement things, and we try and move fast. And sometimes we break things, right? And we break things that our organization relies on. But I think me as the leader, I have to accept that is the nature of the beast. And I tell people, do it, fail fast, but have a plan to roll it back, right? As long as you can roll it back, then I think that's okay. Yes, there's a level of disruption, but everything we're doing is to improve the organization. It's to improve it from an enterprise IT perspective, from a security perspective. So sometimes if we're trying to implement something, hey, and we thought it would work one way and it just doesn't and it breaks things, that's okay. So having a level of trust with your team that, hey, move fast, make decisions. I trust the decisions you're going to make. And sometimes they're going to result in some disruption or break something. I try and do that and reiterate that, because that's the only way people will feel comfortable doing the best they can, right? And really trying to be creative to solve business problems. Otherwise, without that, I think what you end up getting is these iterative changes or improvements rather than sometimes these big jumps or big impactful changes that truly change the business. Lastly, I'll just say, from a fun perspective, right? We try and make it fun. I know, every day is kind of chaotic, and dealing with end users, you're always a ticket or a request or a call away from something disrupting your plan for the day. So, we try and take everything with, with some grace, right? And understand that, this is a job, right? And some things are going to work, some things are not going to work. And some things are going to disrupt your day, right? And it's going to be a bad day, but like tomorrow is going to be fun. So, within our Slack channels, we try and keep things fairly lighthearted, and just make sure people aren't taking things too seriously, so that they realize, like, hey, it may be tough today, but tomorrow it will be better. And then just to kind of round out that second question, I think what I've found, in order to get the, so to speak, seat at the table, get the buy-in from the business, right, and the support that you need, you need to communicate, and communicate often, not only with leadership, but communicate often with the business. A lot of the changes we do impact every user at the company. So we're very big on communicating as much as possible. 2 weeks out, this is coming. 1 week out, this is coming. Tomorrow, this is coming. Today, we're here, right? It is available. So communicating and making sure everybody understands what you're working on and what's coming, I think is super important. And when you do communicate, I know sometimes in the IT space, it's, the things we do get hidden, right? Nobody really sees it because it's behind the scenes. But by communicating, it's also another way of just marketing the group, right? And showing what you're doing, what you're completing, how you're helping the business improve, and mature. So I think communicating is a great way to build that trust and build that support within the organization to get the respect and be able to do what you need to do when, there are times that you have to make some tough choices.